Parker Nolan didn't expect to be dragging a lifeless woman from the ocean with his 6-year-old son screaming behind him. "Dad, she's not moving," Jackson cried, his small fists clenching at the hem of Parker's soaked t-shirt. "I know, buddy," Parker said, voice shaking as he knelt in the sand. The woman's long, dark hair was tangled with seaweed, her lips tinged blue, her chest still. He tilted her head back, checked her airway, and started chest compressions. "Call for help," he yelled at a nearby beachgoer. Jackson crouched beside him, wide-eyed, clutching Parker's arm. "Is she gonna die?" "No," Parker said firmly, even though he wasn't sure. His heart pounded in panic, but he didn't stop. 1, 2, 3, breathe, and then she gasped. Water spilled from her mouth and her body jolted. She coughed violently, eyes fluttering open. Parker exhaled hard, falling back in the sand, chest heaving. "You're okay," he muttered, more to himself than her. She blinked, dazed. "What happened?" "You were drowning," he said. "You passed out. I pulled you out." She coughed again, looking around in confusion. "Where's my bag?" "My phone." "No clue," he said, brushing sand off his knees. "You're lucky I was watching the waves." Jackson stepped forward, eyes locked on her. "You scared me." The woman sat up slowly. Her voice was raspy. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I thought you were dead," he said quietly. She reached over, touched his hand. "Thanks for getting your dad. He saved me." Parker helped her to her feet. "You should go to the hospital." "I'm fine." She winced as she stood fully. "Just disoriented. You nearly drowned." She hesitated, then gave a small nod. "I'll call someone." Parker handed her a towel from his beach bag. "Use this. You're soaked." She took it, fingers brushing his. "What's your name?" "Parker." "Parker Nolan. And this is my son, Jackson." She looked at Jackson like he was the most important person on the beach. "Hi, Jackson." "I'm Waverly." "Like the ocean," Jackson said, squinting up at her. She chuckled. "Yeah, kind of like the ocean." "Waverly what?" Parker asked. She hesitated. "Adler." He didn't recognize the name. It didn't matter. She looked pale, unsteady. "I'm walking you to the lifeguard station," he said. "You can't be alone right now." She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. "Okay." They walked slowly, Jackson holding her hand like he'd known her for years. At the station, she sat, wrapped in another towel. Paramedics checked her vitals, declared she was okay, but advised her to rest. She refused to be taken to the hospital. "I'll call a car," she said. Parker watched her. There was something about her. She didn't act like someone who just drowned. She was calm, composed, but there were shadows under her eyes. "You sure someone's coming for you?" he asked. "Yes." "My driver will be here soon." "Driver," he raised an eyebrow. "You live around here?" She smiled faintly. "Not exactly." Jackson tugged on his sleeve. "Can she come to dinner with us?" "Jackson," Parker said, startled. "What, she needs food." "And you always say food makes everything better." Waverly looked surprised. "That's sweet of you, Jackson, but I don't want to intrude." "You're not," Jackson said. "Please?" Parker scratched the back of his neck. "It's just takeout, nothing fancy." She hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." Just for a bit. 20 minutes later, Waverly sat at their tiny kitchen table in their rented 2-bedroom apartment, still wearing one of Parker's oversized hoodies. Jackson was showing her his dinosaur drawings, and she was genuinely listening. Parker leaned against the counter, watching them. She was beautiful, not in the obvious way, but in the way she smiled at his son like he mattered. In the way she listened like time wasn't money. He made pasta and poured her a glass of cheap wine. She took it without complaint. "So what do you do, Waverly?" he asked. She paused. "Business." "Mostly property, travel, a few investments." Vague, probably rich, but she didn't act like it. "You?" she asked. "Construction, freelance gigs, whatever pays." She glanced around the apartment. "It's cozy." He gave a short laugh. "That's a nice way of saying small." "No, I mean it. It feels warm." He looked at her, really looked. There was something in her eyes, like she'd seen too much. Like she was used to silence and marble floors and being alone. After dinner, she stood to leave, thanking him again. Her driver, a black town car, waited outside. She bent down and hugged Jackson. "Thanks for dinner, buddy. You'll come back, right?" She smiled. "If your dad lets me." Parker opened the door for her. "You're welcome anytime." Before she got in the car, she turned to him. "You saved my life, Parker. Guess I was just at the right place." She held his gaze. "Maybe. But I needed to be saved." And then she was gone. He closed the door, heart pounding for a reason he didn't understand. Jackson looked up at him. "She's like a mermaid," Parker chuckled. "Yeah, maybe she is. but something told him she wasn't just that. And he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the last time he'd see Waverly Adler. 3 days passed before Parker saw her again. He was halfway through installing drywall at a renovation site on the north side of the city when his phone rang an unknown number. He almost didn't answer. But something made him wipe the dust from his hands and press it to his ear. "Parker Nolan," a woman's voice asked, speaking. "It's Waverly, from the beach," he paused, heart giving a strange jolt. "Yeah. I remember. I was hoping I could talk to you." There was a slight hesitation, like she wasn't used to asking for things. He glanced at the exposed beams and the half-finished wall. "Now's not great." "I'm on a job. I'll come to you. You don't even know where I am." She didn't respond right away. "Then text me the address, please." An hour later, a black SUV pulled up to the curb outside the old brownstone. She stepped out, wearing sharply tailored pants and a blouse that probably cost more than his monthly rent. She didn't look out of place, but she definitely didn't look like she belonged on a half-gutted construction site either. Parker met her at the door, wiping his hands on his jeans. "You didn't have to come all the way out here. I wanted to." She stepped inside, carefully avoiding a pile of nails on the floor. "Is this what you do full-time?" When the work's steady, she looked around. "This place has potential, not my call." "I just follow the blueprint." She turned to him. "I came to thank you properly. You already did." "No, I left too quickly that night. I wasn't thinking clearly, and I didn't realize until later that I never even asked if you were okay." "I was fine." She tilted her head. "You weren't shaken." "Not even a little." He looked at her, then back toward the wall he'd been working on. "I've seen worse." That caught her attention. "Military, something like that." She didn't push. Instead, she asked, "Would you let me take you and Jackson out to dinner?" He raised a brow. "You tracked me down to offer dinner." "I know how that sounds. It sounds like you feel guilty." She didn't deny it. "Maybe I do, or maybe I just want to see you both again." Parker studied her carefully. "You're not like most people I know." She gave a small laugh. "That's mutual." He leaned against the frame. "We're not exactly steakhouse people." "I wasn't thinking steakhouse." "Then what?" "There's a food truck festival at Lincoln Park this weekend. Thought it might be something Jackson would like." He crossed his arms. "You don't seem like someone who eats from a paper tray. You don't seem like someone who installs drywall with perfect seams, but here we are." He couldn't help the quiet chuckle. "All right, we'll meet you there." Her gaze softened. "Saturday at 5, fine. But don't wear anything you can't spill hot sauce on." She smiled. "Noted." As she turned to leave, he called after her. "Waverly," she faced him. "You okay now?" A flicker crossed her face, something unspoken. "Getting there." Saturday came with clear skies and the kind of breeze that made the city feel softer, more forgiving. Parker and Jackson arrived just before 5. Jackson wore his favorite hoodie, the one with the ketchup stain that wouldn't come out. Parker had cleaned up a little clean jeans, boots, a button-down that still smelled faintly of sawdust. They found Waverly near the taco stand, holding 2 lemonades and looking completely out of place among the chaos. But she didn't seem to mind. Her hair was down this time, loose and windblown, and she handed Jackson a lemonade without hesitation. "I found the best churros already," she said, crouching to Jackson's level. "Want to help me find the worst hot dog?" He grinned. "Only if it's got mustard." They moved through the stalls together, Waverly letting Jackson drag her from booth to booth, trying samples, rating them out of 10. She didn't flinch when he wiped barbecue sauce on her sleeve. She laughed when he dared her to try a ghost pepper slider, and her eyes watered. Parker watched it all with a strange tightness in his chest. Later, after Jackson ran ahead to chase bubbles blown by a street performer, Parker leaned in. "You're good with him." "I like kids," she said. "They tell the truth, adults don't." "Is that a dig?" "No," she said. "Just something I've learned." He studied her. "You don't talk about yourself much." "That's not accidental," he nodded slowly. "You always have a car waiting, usually, must be nice." She looked at him. "Do you resent that?" "I don't resent much. I've seen what real loss looks like." Waverly's eyes flickered. "So have I." They were quiet for a moment, then she said, "My father died last year. He left everything to me." Parker didn't react. He was in real estate, hotels mostly. "I was supposed to take over after grad school. I didn't want to, but I did." He nodded. Guess that explains the driver. I didn't tell you before because I didn't want you to look at me the way most people do. How's that? Like I'm a bank account. I don't need your money. I know. They fell silent again, the sounds of the crowd surrounding them. After a while, Waverly spoke. You and Jackson, it's just the two of you, he nodded. His mom left when he was 2. Do you ever get time for yourself? Not really. Waverly looked at him. Would you let me take him for a day sometime, just to the museum or the aquarium? I'd bring him back safe. He blinked. You barely know us. I know enough to want to, he hesitated. Why? She looked at him, eyes steady. Because I can't stop thinking about what would have happened if you weren't there that day, and I don't want this to be over. Parker exhaled slowly. Okay, he said. One day, we'll see how you do. She smiled, this time not carefully, not reserved, just real. And Parker knew, without understanding how or why, that nothing about this was going to be simple. The aquarium trip was Waverly's idea, and Parker agreed on one condition: he went too. They met on the steps of the shed just after noon that Sunday. Jackson bouncing on the balls of his feet, clutching a crumpled brochure he'd begged Parker to print out the night before. Waverly arrived in sneakers, jeans, and a navy coat cinched at the waist, her hair pulled back in a braid that made her look far younger than she had that first night. You're early, she said, surprised. Jackson's been ready since sunrise, Parker replied, nodding toward his son, whose eyes were already scanning the glass facade of the building. I told him there's a giant octopus, Waverly said with a grin. He's been talking about it since Friday. You remembered? Parker asked, eyebrow raised. I listen. Inside, Jackson darted from tank to tank, pressing his hands against the glass as stingrays glided by like underwater kites. Waverly kept pace easily, crouching beside him when he pointed out a shark's jagged teeth or explained the difference between sea lions and seals. Parker followed a few paces behind. Watching quietly, they stopped at the jellyfish exhibit. Waverly stood beside him, arms crossed loosely. He's a smart kid, she said. Yeah, too smart sometimes. She glanced at him. You're doing a good job. Parker rubbed the back of his neck. Most days I'm just trying not to mess him up. You're holding everything together on your own. That's more than most people can say. He looked at her, then nodded toward Jackson, who was now tapping rhythmically on the glass in time with the pulsing jellyfish. He doesn't remember much before it was just us. Waverly hesitated. Did she leave, or she walked away? Parker said, voice flat. No drama, no custody fight, just a note on the fridge and her keys on the counter. Waverly's eyes didn't leave his. You must have been furious. I was numb. Then I had a toddler to feed and a job to find. No time for fury. She tilted her head just slightly. You ever let anyone in since? Not really. Because of her. Because I don't have the luxury of getting it wrong again. They were quiet as the light filtered through the tank in shifting blues and golds. Waverly spoke softly. My mother left too when I was 9. Parker turned. What happened? She said she couldn't breathe in my father's world. She wanted to go find herself, but she didn't invite me along for the journey. He didn't say anything, just watched her. She sent postcards the first year. Then nothing. Jackson ran up then, grabbing Waverly's hand. There's a penguin feeding in 5 minutes, she smiled, squeezing his fingers. Lead the way. They followed him to the far wing, where rows of children gathered on the floor in front of the rocky outcrop. Waverly and Parker stood at the back, their shoulders brushing. You're good at this, Parker said. At what? Being with him. I think I just like that he doesn't ask for anything I can't give. He glanced at her. You always sound like you're apologizing for being rich. I'm not. But I've seen the way it changes people, how it makes them hungry for the wrong things. Yeah, Parker said, but it also means you've got options most people don't. You think that makes things easier? I think it makes things different. She didn't argue. After the show, they wandered back outside into the cold. The lake wind whipped across the pavement, and Waverly instinctively reached for Jackson's hood, pulling it up. Parker watched the motion. You don't do anything halfway, do you? I used to. What changed? I stopped pretending I was happy. They walked in silence past the fountains, Jackson skipping ahead. Parker slowed. Why me? Waverly looked over. What do you mean? You could be with someone who drives a Bentley and wears a watch that costs more than I make in a year. You think that's what I want? I think it's the world you're used to. She stopped walking. I'm used to being looked at like an asset or a liability, never a person. You didn't ask me for anything, not even my last name. I didn't need it, exactly. Jackson ran back, holding a souvenir coin he'd gotten from the machine inside. Look, it's got a dolphin on it. That's awesome, buddy, Parker said, ruffling his hair. Waverly crouched. You want to keep it in my bag so it doesn't get lost, Jackson thought for a moment, then nodded solemnly. But don't let it fall out. I won't. They parted ways outside the aquarium. Waverly hugged Jackson first, then turned to Parker. I'd like to see you again, she said quietly. He studied her. You sure you want to tangle with all this? I already am. She got into the waiting SUV and didn't look back. That night, after Jackson fell asleep with the dolphin coin clutched in his hand, Parker sat on the fire escape with a beer and his thoughts. The city buzzed around him, but his mind was quiet. He didn't know what Waverly Adler wanted from him, but for the first time in years, he wanted to find out. The first snow of the season came heavy and sudden. Parker stood at the window of his apartment, watching flakes swirl past the street lamp, one hand resting on the back of Jackson's chair as his son colored with intense focus. The heat kicked on with a groan, and he made a mental note to check the filter again. There had been 3 more outings since the aquarium, each one less accidental, more deliberate. Waverly showed up now with board games tucked under her arm, or with tickets to obscure puppet shows Jackson inexplicably loved. She never stayed long, never overstepped, but her presence had become something Parker found himself checking the clock for. That night, a knock sounded at the door just as Jackson was brushing his teeth. Parker glanced at the time later than usual. He opened the door and found Waverly on the other side, her coat dusted with snow, cheeks flushed from the chill. I brought soup, she said, holding up a paper bag. He stepped aside. You make it? I ordered from a place in Lincoln Square that's supposedly run by a retired opera singer. She sings while she stirs, couldn't pass that up. He let out a quiet breath of amusement and closed the door behind her. Jackson's getting ready for bed, but he'll want to say goodnight. I won't stay long. She unwrapped her scarf and glanced around. It's cozy in here, he reached for the bag. You've said that before. I meant it more this time. Jackson ran in wearing pajamas with rocket ships on them. Waverly, did you bring donuts? Soup tonight, she said with a wink, but I'll trade you for a bedtime story. He frowned dramatically. Only if it's the dragon one. Deal. Parker leaned against the counter as she followed Jackson down the hall to his room. He could hear her voice, low and animated, and Jackson's giggles between her lines. It hit him in a way nothing had in years, soft and sharp all at once. She wasn't just visiting anymore. She was settling in, one laugh, one bedtime story at a time. By the time she returned to the kitchen, her expression had shifted, quieter, thoughtful. He said something tonight, she said, removing her coat. He asked if I was your girlfriend. Parker's brows lifted. What did you say? That I wasn't. Yet. He paused, then set the soup down on the counter slowly. You said yet. That's a bold move. I figured I'd match your energy. He looked at her for a long moment. Waverly, I'm not a man who plays games. That's why I'm here. She crossed to him, her boots muffled against the worn tile. I've been thinking about what it would mean to try, really try, not just with Jackson, with you. He folded his arms. You're not just offering dinners and bedtime stories anymore. No, I'm offering whatever this could become. I know it's complicated, I know you're protective, but I'm not scared of your past. My past isn't what worries me, he said. It's your future. You come from a world where people have private elevators and hedge funds. You could be in Monaco tomorrow if you wanted. I don't want Monaco. You say that now. I'm not here because it's convenient, she said, her voice steady. I'm here because when you pulled me out of the water, something shifted. I didn't know it then, not exactly, but I've never felt more awake than I have in the last few weeks. He stepped closer. You're the kind of woman who disappears when things get messy. You're wrong. You said yourself people only see dollar signs when they look at you. Yes, but you never did. He reached up, brushing a curl from her cheek. You really think this could work, she nodded. I know it can. He didn't kiss her then. Instead, he reached behind her and pulled open the fridge. You like pickles, she blinked. What? Jackson hates them. I buy them anyway. Don't know why. Maybe I was waiting for someone who liked them. She laughed softly. I love pickles. He handed her the jar. Then we're halfway there. The next week, Parker got a call from a developer he'd worked with once before. Big job, long-term contract. He hesitated until the man added, "We're converting a hotel downtown. Whole floor needs redesigning. Pays double your rate." Parker hung up and stared at the wall for a long time. That night, he told Waverly over takeout on the living room floor. "You're not sure if you should take it," she guessed. "It's steady money. Good money. But it's a lot of hours. And you're worried about Jackson," he nodded. "I'd need help, real help." She set down her fork. "Then let me help." He looked at her hard. "Not just visits, not just fun weekends. I know. This is early mornings, school pickups, parent-teacher meetings. Laundry that never ends." She nodded. "I want all of it." He narrowed his eyes. "This isn't a fairy tale, Waverly." "No," she said, taking his hand. "It's better." A month later, the job was underway. Parker worked afternoons into evenings, and Waverly filled in the spaces. Jackson adjusted like he'd been waiting for it, like she'd always been meant to be part of the picture. She never tried to take over. She asked before changing routines. She folded laundry wrong, and Parker teased her for it. She burned a grilled cheese once, and Jackson declared it still kinda awesome. She laughed more, and the space between them grew smaller by the day. Then one night, as snow whispered against the windows, Parker walked into the living room to find her asleep on the couch, Jackson curled against her shoulder, a book open across both their laps. He stood in the doorway, something catching in his throat. He didn't question it anymore. He just knew. The next morning, he asked her to come with him to the lake. The wind was brutal, the sky pale with light. They stood near the spot where he'd pulled her from the water months ago. "I used to come here when I didn't know what the hell I was doing," he said quietly. "Back when it was just me and a baby and no one to call." She slipped her gloved hand into his. "You don't have to be alone anymore." "I know," he turned to her. "I don't have a ring," he said. "Not yet, but I've got a toolbox full of things I can build. And I want to build something with you." She nodded, voice caught. "You just did." He kissed her, slow and certain, as the cold wind tugged at their coats and the lake stretched wide behind them. They didn't need marble floors or champagne toasts. They had something better. They had each other. And that was enough. Parker stood quietly in the back of the banquet hall, watching Waverly talk to a man in a tailored charcoal suit. The room shimmered with low lighting, gold accents, and a string quartet playing something elegant but forgettable. She was dressed in a midnight blue gown that dipped low in the back, her hair swept up, diamond earrings catching the light each time she tilted her head. He didn't belong there, and he knew it, but she'd asked him to come anyway. "This is the annual Adler Foundation dinner," she'd explained earlier that week, her fingers threading through his as they sat on the couch. "It's the first one I've hosted since my father passed. I'd like you with me." He hadn't wanted to. Tuxedos and wine lists longer than menus weren't his thing. But he'd said yes because she'd looked at him like it mattered, not for show, not for status, but because she wanted him beside her when it counted. Now, watching her work the room with practiced ease, he took a sip of bourbon and scanned the crowd. Everyone here knew her name. Some nodded politely at him, most didn't. He didn't care. The only person he was here for was the one who turned toward him just then, her expression easing the knot in his chest. She crossed the room, her heels silent on the marble, and reached for his hand the second she was close enough. "I was starting to think you were going to bolt," she said under her breath. "I thought about it," he admitted. "Still might if someone offers me a plate of foie gras again." She laughed softly. "You look great in a tux, by the way. No one's ever said that to me. I like being the first." She led him toward a quieter corner, away from the donors and board members. "There's something I wanted to show you." He followed her through a side door into a small adjoining room filled with framed architectural renderings and display boards. She stopped in front of one and gestured toward it. "This is the new project I told you about last week. The community center." He stepped closer, taking in the plans. "You're building this, I'm funding it, but I need someone to oversee the actual construction." He looked at her, eyes narrowing slightly. "You mean me?" "I mean, if you want it, I trust you. It's going to be in East Garfield Park." A space for kids, job training programs, after-school resources, not a vanity project, something real. He studied the drawings, open floor plans, natural light, indoor basketball court, computer labs. You're serious? I am. It's a huge job, I know. And you want me to take it because you care about people, because you never cut corners, because you understand the difference between building something that lasts and something that just looks good. He didn't answer right away. Then I'll need to put together a crew. I'll approve the budget. You hire who you trust. Parker turned back to the board, jaw tight. You're not doing this to give me a handout, are you? No, she said, stepping in front of him. I'm doing this because I believe in what you can do. And because I want us to build something together that leaves a mark. He nodded slowly. All right, I'm in. When they returned to the main room, the MC was announcing the next speaker. Waverly was called to the stage, and Parker watched her step into the spotlight with the kind of poise that had once made him doubt they could ever belong to the same world. But when she looked out over the crowd, her gaze found him first. She spoke about legacy and change, about using privilege to create access. She mentioned her father's work, then shifted. My life changed this year, she said. Not because of a business deal or a title, but because someone reminded me what it means to be seen for who you are, not what you have. That's what this foundation is about. That's what tonight is about. After the applause, she returned to him, her hand sliding into his without a word. Later, in the back of the car with the city lights flickering past the windows, she leaned her head against his shoulder. You were right, she said softly. About what? It's not a fairy tale. He looked down at her. No, but it's still a damn good story. She smiled and closed her eyes. The next morning, Parker made breakfast while Jackson worked on building a Lego tower at the table. Waverly was in the kitchen too, barefoot, wearing one of his old t-shirts, hair still damp from her shower. She flipped through a newspaper she wasn't really reading. Jackson, she said suddenly, what would you think about moving? He looked up. Like to another house. Yeah, one with a yard. Maybe a tree house, he gasped. Can we have a dog? Parker raised an eyebrow. We're not getting a dog, Waverly grinned. We'll discuss it. Jackson beamed and went back to his Legos. Later that week, they toured a house on the edge of Lincoln Park. It had a backyard, a porch swing, and enough room for Jackson to have a planetarium mural on his ceiling if he wanted it. The agent barely made it through the second floor before Waverly turned to Parker. This is the one. You sure? She nodded. It feels like us. They closed on it a month later. That spring, Parker stood in the yard he'd helped landscape himself, watching Jackson run through the grass with a kite Waverly had brought home from a trip to the coast. Waverly sat on the porch steps, glass of lemonade in hand, watching with quiet contentment. I never thought I'd have this, Parker said, sitting beside her. She rested her head against his shoulder. Neither did I. You still think about leaving that old life, she shook her head. Not anymore. He kissed her then, slow and certain, while the sounds of laughter and wind tangled around them. They didn't need to say the words. They lived them every day in the shared keys, the Sunday pancakes, the quiet check-ins when one of them was tired, the way she always saved the last piece of toast for him because he liked it just a little burnt. Their life wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, and that was everything.